All right, so I'm Coach McCarry. We're back with the rest of my staff, Josh Boggs and Brad Arnold. Josh is the pitching coach you guys previously met. Brad is the hitting coach. Um, Basically, we want to jump back on a call today, another kind of office talk session, and kind of talk through some of the differences between instructing at a private facility or outside of a team setting, and teaching a team with the context of scholastic baseball underneath it, essentially. So both of these guys have made a career teaching at facilities for a long period of time. And last year was really their first foray into collegiate coaching in a team sense. And I wanted to kind of dig into some of the differences and approaches of how that's changed over the course of the year for them. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah.
Deal. So, I mean, basically, I think the easiest way to start this off would be like, take yourself back to the fall. And let's say we just completed the first week of team practice. What are the immediate surface level differences that you can kind of unearth that you didn't realize you were walking into? Josh, why don't you go first?
So for me, it's when primarily we were working with middle and high school kids, mostly younger high school kids, kind of the range of 7 to 10th-ish grades.
Gotcha.
Most of those guys in the private sector don't have a plan. They don't have a program they've already done or want to do. Like, they're pretty much clean slates. If there is anything, it's maybe mechanical where we can iron out. We've got plenty of time. But there isn't I always do plyos. I always do this drill. I always have this piece of equipment. Like, most of them are clean slates, and they're looking to me for what should I use. Whereas we show up day one, and let's say of the 16, 18 dudes we had, 12 to 14 were pretty secure in what their program needed to be. They knew they liked to go plyos on this day, this day, this day. They didn't want to do it this day. They liked long toss before this or that. And it was, instead of me coming in and saying, all right, here's your program, it was trying to figure out, well, what do you already do? And where at all does it need to be adjusted? And trying to figure that out on an individual basis versus, okay, here's the screen, here's what he doesn't do well, here's this, and put the pieces together and make the program. Whereas now it's, okay, well, he already knows how to do X, Y, Z. He doesn't like doing A, but he can do B really well. Maybe we need to fix here, adjust there.
Right.
As opposed to just broad program.
Did any of the screening that we did early on, because we do some pretty comprehensive screening and movement correction, did that help you kind of bridge the gap between what they were already doing and what they needed to do a little bit?
A little bit. And I think the biggest difference was getting to work with guys every day. Wasn't something you did very often in the private trainings area, usually because you're getting kids 2 or 3 times a week. So there's a bit less autonomy in that area where I'm trying to balance when it's high school coach. Maybe it's in the winter and high school coach gets 1 day a week and he wants everybody throwing pens. Okay, well, that's fine. I've got to work around that. Versus now, I've got all of it. You throw a pen when I tell you to throw a pen. Or we're going to do, I can control the schedule a bit more. So it was a bit of an adjustment to how do we do it every day versus how do I cover 2 or 3 days a week.
Sure. Brad, how about you? Would you, after 1 week, what was kind of the eye-opener?
The amount of time you've got with these athletes, especially on the junior college side, being able to fit guys in between classes. In the private sector, I think on a maximum, you're going to see a kid twice a week. And that time is so valuable and structured so much that you're trying to get as much out of it as you can. And you get into that mold of, if you've got time structured, get done what you need to, and all of a sudden you get them for 5-6 days a week, and realizing that it doesn't have to be that same structure. And part of the structure is being able to help build in the ability to take in the input and then spit the output on yourself. In order for that to work, you've got to have your own time to sort of play around with it. And that's what these kids do. If they come in on a Monday, the rest of the week, if they're taking to heart everything that you guys had worked on, they're taking those steps on their own. When you've got the kids for 6 days a week and you're with them and structuring everything, you kind of lose that a little bit. And I'm sure it became a little overbearing for them at times.
I can imagine that. Is there a difficulty when you're seeing a guy twice a week versus seeing a guy 6 times a week where you've got to adjust on how much positive output you're looking for from session to session? Like, do you feel an impetus to make great strides every time you see them in the same way that you would if you only got them for an hour twice a week?
It doesn't have to be physical strides. You don't have to, let's say you've got them on a Rapsodo unit or a blast motion. You don't have to see jumps in the metrics, but jumps in the cognitive awareness. Trusting that they're going to be able to take a step out of the facility and be able to go take ownership and do it on their own. And they're getting a chance to do that without us as coaches, where in the team setting, we're literally with them the entire time. And you kind of lose – that can become a little bit of a gray area and lose some of that disconnection to go figure it out.
Sure. Yeah, I'll say that's something when you get a guy, people talk about the lesson model where you feel like you have to come up with something new every week. But there's also like Brad said, you just kind of give them an idea and it's up to them to run with it. Whereas you get a dude 6 days a week. If I give him the idea, I see him again tomorrow and maybe I want to tweak it. Maybe I went home and studied something and now, okay, I understand it better. Let me tell it to him different. And instead of just letting him go figure it out, I've given him 8 different thoughts on the same thing because I couldn't talk to him, because I can talk to him. I couldn't just set him free and say, go figure it out.
Sure.
Exactly. It's so hard to turn that switch off.
Do you think that there's not that any guy on our team distrusts the instruction, but is there more opportunities for you guys to be wrong in something that you've done where that didn't exist in the facility so much? Like you couldn't make as many mistakes because you didn't see them as often, essentially.
We're also working with smarter players, at least higher level guys that can they've been through 3 or 4 or 5 instructors on their own. In my case, their second pitching coach in 2 years of college. Like, they've had some ideas. They could be like, okay, Boggs just said something stupid. That doesn't make sense. Whereas maybe I could just say that to a freshman in high school and he wouldn't know any better.
Yeah.
Whereas like there's a little higher accountability on my end to make sure I actually know what I'm saying because they have the ability to call me on it.
I think the awareness of knowing that makes you better. I think that does to a degree. Brad, do you experience similar things with the hitters to a degree?
Absolutely. One of the big things is getting athletes to be able to think for themselves. And with the younger kids, they've not experienced that enough. They've not been in the game long enough at a high enough level where they've been forced to be able to do so. You're going to try to open that up. A lot of our older athletes, whether they've asked themselves or somebody's asked them to think for themselves or not, they've got a better ability to do so. And it's almost planting a smaller seed than what we had to do in the private sector with younger athletes, plant a smaller seed and then let it grow on its own.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So like knowing what you guys know now, you've got a full fall and you've got 15 games during the spring, whatever it may be, but really you got a 6-month environment introduction, essentially. Stepping back into another fall at this point, what do those differences tell you about how you need to change your approach going into the instruction period? Brad, go ahead.
Structure a whole lot less. Give them a lot more freedom. More freedom to kind of go, okay, on these days, what is it that you need to be able to go work through your own processes? We've got the idea planted. We kind of know the direction we're going rather than me putting the framework up for you, putting up the framework. What is it that you need to be able to play around and give them a little more autonomy in that time, especially if we're working in a small group as opposed to a large team scale.
Sure. Boggs?
I think the most exciting thing for me is there's going to be, how do I put it? There's 8 or 10 sophomores that at least understand how I talk and what I'm looking for and what my verbiage means.
They've got your language. That matters.
On the pitching side, that's big. Not to discredit the hitting side or hitters, but by and large, a lot of hitting is BP on the field, and it's a lot of the same kind of thing over and over, and you can make an easy adjustment. Whereas on the pitching side, there's maybe 2 higher intent days a week that we can really test something and see if something worked. And then there's 2 recovery days where we're not getting a whole lot of throwing stuff done. It feels like less opportunity. So having half the pitching staff in theory already know what I mean a recovery day looks like or what a higher intent day looks like, I think can help because I'm not spending the first 3, 5, 7 weeks instilling that. Half the guys know I can start teaching the freshmen along with myself. So hopefully by 2 or 3 weeks into the season, we're already on the same page, as opposed to getting 6, 7 weeks into the fall and some guys aren't still quite sure exactly what I mean by certain things.
Right. I think you could use a model kind of like you're using those returning players almost like Wi-Fi extenders, where maybe the signal isn't as strong as it's coming out of the modem from you, but if we're using them to extend the signal, maybe it's still good enough to stream a show. Maybe, and maybe that's all we need for a recovery day is the competency to stream a show, but they need to be close to the modem on the day they're on a mound. I think that's less work for you, and it also helps you branch what your ideology is better throughout the team.
Right, and it also provides a model for the freshmen, because the sophomores kind of know what I already expect and what needs to be done. They can just do it, and the freshmen kind of just follow along, versus before it was me teaching all 16, 18 of them at once and then trying to tweak here and there. Now I've got half, in theory, that already know what they're doing.
That's the environment multiplier. Yeah, that's the people want to use the word culture, but really I think when we're talking on a player development side, if you're making a positive environment and you've got guys with an expertise in that environment, they can accelerate the growth process of guys that step into it. I think at junior college that's especially hard because we're going to turn over 20 roster spots a year. So those multipliers that we have left on the roster, they need to be viable voices. They need to matter for that signal to get out through the rest of them to really get what we need to. At the 4-year level, you might have 12 seniors that they just dictate practice every day. There are 150 structured practices into their career. There are 150 games into it. They're going to set the tempo every day if you've got some really good seniors. We don't have that benefit to a degree. So I think the more freshmen that are competent, that return as sophomores, make that next freshman class that much better, especially on the pitching side.
And it makes my life a lot easier because now I don't have to reinstall everything.
True. Brad, do you think there's a similar amplification process on the hitting side, or are those guys more nuanced in that they kind of the environment matters less to them?
A little bit, yes. I think because we're so reaction based in what we're doing, they've got to be able to figure out, I think, a little bit more on their own. I think that's something that I would love to do going into next year, is part of backing off on the structure in putting them in more environments where they're the ones that are conversing with each other on how to get jobs done, or why do they think they're not getting jobs done.
Sure. Maybe that helps proliferate a language through them, no matter where they come from.
Yeah, and being able to just sit and listen to them. Be the one to learn from how they're trying to process through it, whether it's them communicating to a teammate or how a teammate's able to take in that information and then go spit it out. Being able to use that type of environment to help create something that's going to let them take the steps forward that they need.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. How much does my own individual language and my own individual kind of wants and needs out of the positional groups influence how you approach coaching them in that manner?
A lot, because while the intent of the language has got to stay the same on the way that they view it, how they're understanding it. If something that you're saying, the way that they perceive what you're saying is going to produce a different intent than what they think from me, it's going to cloud, it's going to create confusion and frustration that ultimately a lot of them are just going to shut down.
Sure.
And you get into that mode and all of a sudden it's like, okay, nothing that you can try and help them as much as you want, have some of the best things to say to them, but it's just going to hit a brick wall because they've got all this frustration from having to overthink and overprocess what's being instructed to them.
Sure. Josh, do I influence the pitching instruction or the structure at all with kind of what I need out of them?
Yeah, I think in a weird way, you and I kind of balance each other out. Having spent 3 years in a facility primarily focusing on velocity development, that's kind of my foray, my focus.
Yep.
And kind of get blind to, well, you still got to be able to get dudes out. There's still got to be enough of functional pitching ability, not just what the radar gun says. So it's enough of me constantly pushing guys to work harder, train harder, throw farther, coupled with the occasional, yeah, but you got to throw the damn thing over the plate. Or I don't care if you walk the bases loaded. Like,
yeah,
enough of a balance that it works well, but they're also, neither one of us has to play both sides and they get kind of confused on what we're looking for.
It's
true. It's very clear that we prefer to throw hard and throw strikes.
Yes.
And there's not how come when he only throws 83, he doesn't get yelled at, but I throw 89 and miss and I get yelled at, or vice versa. And there isn't a disconnect to it.
That makes sense to me. So knowing what you guys know now, what could you take from the team setting back into the cage that you think would make yourself better there if you went back into private instruction full time? Josh, you go.
I think the pitching side's always different because how a guy looks in a cage throwing a bullpen can be dramatically different than how he looks even throwing a bullpen on a field in front of his high school coach who yells at him constantly and he's scared of, let alone being in an actual game. And that's something with several of the high school coaches was I could send you video. He looked awesome in his pen. And then they're telling me, yeah, you walked 5 in an inning and a third. And I'm like, I can show you 30 pitches in a row and 25 are exactly where you want them. Like, but being able to now, having been in that guy's shoes a bit more at a higher level to go, okay, how do I tie the two together and how do I mimic the environment a bit more of a game in a cage facility? And now I can't get perfect, but maybe we need to get dudes to stand in more often, or maybe we just get like Major League, the dummy batter that just stands in there. But maybe there's a bridge that needs to be done, and having communicated with that high school coach or travel coach or whoever it is more often to go, okay, what's he not doing in games? And focus the development at times less on how do I raise this ceiling and more how do we raise the floor.
That makes sense. I don't think you know to build that bridge until you've seen the body of water. Yeah. I think it's that's something that you wouldn't know until you were kind of in the shoes of a guy who deals specifically with the team context. So I think that's fantastic. Yeah. Brad, how about you?
Being able to help bridge that gap between conscious input and subconscious output and reaction. It's so easy in that cage setting to be able to go, okay, I'm not able to throw the ball 90 miles an hour at a hit. And so the time constraint of what's going on, it's much easier to be able to consciously think through everything and get the outcome or the desired outcome. You go into a game, live bullets, adrenaline, the time constraints are much greater, and athletes are getting so sped up that they can go with the conscious input, but they can't turn it into subconscious output. It becomes a thought process trying to get through it. So being in more of a facility setting where you don't get that, I think the conversations, it's not a learned trait to be able to just subconsciously let everything go and then go perform at a high level the way that you've been training, but being able to have those conversations in a one-on-one or in a small group on giving them tools how to do that on their own. How do I take myself from I'm thinking about what my lead hip is trying to do, I'm thinking about what my arms and hands are trying to do, to building trust. I think that's the biggest thing. Do I trust that it's going to happen? And do I trust that if it doesn't work for one swing, it doesn't mean I'm screwed for the rest of the day, that I've got to go take swings off the tee to go regain that feel.
Sure.
And being able to have the right conversations with them to help give them the tools to process that.
That makes sense. Are there some influential variables in the team setting and in games that you maybe didn't know existed from the cage? Like, are there some things that are influencing hitters or pitchers that's specific to the team setting that maybe you didn't account for in training in the cage previously?
No, not so, because while it's the first real taste at the college level, it's still the same thing at every level. I mean,
the game's the game. Yeah.
It's more how do you build that conversation, or being able to build that conversation appropriately, allowing them the tools to be able to go do it.
That makes sense.
Rather than trying to do it for them, how do they do it being able to give it to them so they can do it for themselves, and providing those opportunities. It can't just be, here's the cage work, and then go turn your brain off and go do it in a game. You've got to be able to build the bridge so that they can process through it.
Sure. Josh, is there anything that you didn't know existed that now is definitely something that exists that influences pitchers?
I think it's something that I think we all know existed, but never really saw up hand, is just handling the bullpen. And I think something, because it's not many guys, especially at the travel level and high school level, where a guy knows, yeah, I start every Tuesday, or I'm the second starter on the weekend on my travel team. Like most guys are maybe he starts a game, maybe he's out of relief. And can we mimic his training in a way to kind of prepare him for that get hot, cool down, and then get ready real quick because now you got to go in, or get up, get ready real quick, and then stop because you got out of it. We got the double play. Like, I think that's something that if you've never done it before, that's really hard to do, to be able to do that and then go in and go get a guy out, or sit down and then the next day start, or not even start, but just come in the next day having done all that. I think there's a way in a training environment to kind of prep guys a little bit better for, you got 6 minutes from the time I hit the stopwatch to you need to be ready to throw on the mound.
Sure.
Like, and start letting them figure out, well, what if I give them 5 minutes, 6 minutes to do it, what do they see as important? And maybe when we're building out their program, go, okay, well, if I crunch the time and I give him from 15 minutes to 5, this is what he likes to do best. Maybe at that I need to focus more on in his program.
Yeah, I think specifically there's a freshman or two every year who have never been told to get hot and then didn't go in the game. And they don't know how to handle it. They think I don't like them, or they think like I took
nefarious. They don't know how to get in the middle.
Yeah.
They only know how to get hot to get ready to pitch. They don't know how to just get loose and if trouble arises.
Exactly.
They don't know how to just be ready to get ready.
I think that's and even during the fall, we play 20 some odd games, but it's all almost broken up by full innings. We're not really making any mid-inning substitutions. So it's not something we address immediately. And it's something that maybe I should have addressed with them, because I'm assuming that you've done some of it, or it's ever present in your instruction. And why would it be? You hadn't done it, you hadn't prepared them for hey, he might get you loose for the two right-handers, but if we get the double play ball, you're not going in the game. Yeah. I think that's a functional conversation maybe we need to have a little bit more with the young guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's just not part of what they do. So how does it change how you evaluate a player now that you know the game at the team level, that at the collegiate level specifically? What maybe did you value previously or feel enticed to approach previously that you won't anymore? Kind of the perspective shift of what you're looking for in a specific athlete, as opposed to one that you're just trying to get into your into the cage and work with. Brad, you go.
Okay. As an instructor, it excites me seeing a freak athlete who has no idea what he's doing. And based off that, knowing that he's been told, let's see, a kid who can run lightning fast, who's been told, hey, hit the ball on the ground, hit the ball on the ground, hit the ball on the ground, where you know that he's got such explosive rotational capabilities, he could be a power guy type deal, and being able to tap into that. On the team side, you don't have that time. It may take 2 or 3 years before it clicks, but you don't have that amount of time to be able to work together on a team setting where you're going to need to produce results now on a large scale. And so being able to not necessarily find finished products, but find guys who you know can perform at a high level, but trusting that the small tweaks that you're comfortable with, being able to help them through finding those little things that you know are going to help take them to that next level. And,
sure.
And it's going to take much more of a, I don't like the term quick fix, but it's, you know where I'm going with it.
Yeah, no, I think I learned coming out of professional scouting into Division I recruiting, I had to learn that I needed something that put the kid on the field. And something functional that put him in the lineup or on the field, because to develop, you need to play. There's only so much that we can do off the field to develop them for when the bright lights are on.
Yeah.
So they had to have a carrying tool to put them in the lineup from day one. The one that I always settled on, the one that always entices me offensively, is hey, I know I'm getting a fastball and it's on the outer third, and the ability to carry it into the opposite field gap with power.
Yes.
That's always the thing that if I see, if you're that left-handed hitter in that high school game and you get out 82 from the right-hander on the outer third and you can hit the double into the left center field gap, I feel pretty awesome that I can find a spot for you in the lineup as I develop you, because you're carrying that competency in.
No,
So that as a scout, I saw things that same way.
And that's worded a whole lot better, but the direction I wanted to go with it. Because it is that in-game that you're talking about that we miss on the facility side. We're trying to make adjustments in low-pressure environments, or even if we want to ramp up pressure with velo and machines and whatnot, still not baseball related.
Sure.
And being able to get a kid live bullets and then be able to discuss what the next steps are from there, that hits a whole lot more than off of it. It's two different types of athletes that you're looking for.
Sure. I think you could even admit this year on the roster, we had some dudes with what I would call ugly-ish or non-traditional swings that were better baseball players or brought more to the field, brought more ability to help us win than maybe some guys with some pretty swings or some more aesthetically pleasing swings, you know? And like, I don't know that you can quantify that stuff in a cage as much, if that makes sense.
No, not at all.
Boggs, what about you? How does it change kind of how you view kids?
On the pitching side, I think it's from the facility, having known over the hundreds of kids you've worked with, you look back and go, okay, who did I help the best? And you start to see the pattern of it's this type of player, this type of athlete. And now it's, well, can I go recruit that guy? Because I know I make that guy better and fairly quickly.
Yeah.
Like, can I find the undersized whippy arm kid with a lower half mechanical flaw, and just trust that 3 months of reverse lunges, deadlifts with gorillas in the weight room and the core velocity belt and whatever, I can make that kid better. And we start looking for that guy versus the guy I've always kind of struggled with is the tall, lanky dude.
Sure.
Right. That's just trying to find like who do I know in past that I've worked well with and really helped? Let's go find that kid. Let's go recruit that kid in some way, shape, or form.
Right. No, that makes sense. I think I discovered a while ago that if I'm going to recruit them, they need to have a butt. Like just in a physical form, I need somebody with some trunk stability and strength, especially with what I do weight room wise, what I do mechanically with pitchers on the mound. What I value, I think that stability that's present in the lower half really is something that has to be there. I don't know that I have the time to develop it all the time. You've got to bring some other cards to the table if you're not stable through that center lower core, for me in a lot of ways. Obviously the context of the game and what you do on the field matters a lot, but that tends to be a bias that I have at this point. Okay, Brad, so coming out of a cage and into a team setting, what are some things that you would consistently use in the cage as an instructional tool, whether it's data gathering or it's a constraint implement, that you no longer think you should use as much in the team setting? And maybe what's something you found value in the team setting that you now like to go back into the cage with?
K-Vest is my baby. I absolutely love it, and love being able to take hitters through it. On a facility individual side, ultimately we're trying to build better hitters, right? All the movement talk, all the mechanical talk, ultimately trying to build better hitters.
Yeah, I don't give a crap about your swing. I want you to hit.
Yeah, correct. In a cage, there is no real proof that we're hitting better. I can't tell you that you're going to slug better. I can't tell you that just because we do this. So being able to use K-Vest in a way that we have tangential proof that you are getting better in what you sought out is so vital. And we can use it frequently. We can use it as much as we need, whether it's
in a cage.
Yeah, in a cage, we can create a baseline and we can go from there. And if we're finding areas that we're getting stuck, we can bring it back and then find, okay, do we need to go down a different rabbit hole, or what else is going on that we may be able to see 90% of the time or 95% of the time with our eyes and video, but what's the 5% that tool gets to tell us? That's time consuming in time that we have in a cage. In a team setting, you don't have that time, nor do you maybe have kids who are really interested in it. So while it's still an important piece. And I think how I would use it in a team setting, or how we would use it in a team setting going forward, let's create the baseline, let's create the parameters, and then let's trust. Let's let the athlete run with it, and let's trust if he feels like the effort is dropping and the output is getting better, then we are 100% in the right direction. We don't need to go back and retest. And just let him continue to run and run and run. And at that point, then leave it up to them. If it's like, if they buy into the information and want to get back to it again, sweet. If not, it doesn't matter anymore.
Sure. Do you, I saw you guys fiddling a ton with wedges this year. Is that something that you used in a cage, and do you value it a little differently now, or at a larger magnitude?
Value it a ton. I think what I love about it is we get a chance to put guys into positions without having to think about it. So let's say for a kid who struggles with getting into a hinge, and it's not so much a movement thing, it's more, or not so much a mobility issue, it's just understanding how to get there. You can put the wedge underneath the back heel, kind of get him into get him in an elevated heel position, and it's going to force him into better positions, or else he's going to fall. And then we can create an environment where it's all external output focus. He's not worried about how deep is my hinge. I just get to feel it as my goal is all external.
The more we externalize those things, the more, I want to say, efficient your use of time instructionally with the kids is in the team setting?
Absolutely, yes. Yes.
Because they almost become their own teachers to a degree.
Yeah, and you could bring it onto a field too. Let's say we're going high velo machine work and it's a kid who's just not quite trusting it. You can stick it out on the field without taking away time, and you're not taking away the rep, and you can kind of go back and forth of throw it in for a couple, take it out for a couple. And we're not slowing up anybody else's development time.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense to me. Boggs, how do you apply toys differently now?
I think the big one is with how much in the private facility we used Rapsodo on the pitching side. Don't overly miss it. That's not to say it's not a good toy and it's not a good tool, and we're messing around with pitch logic now. But you know who gives the best pitch design feedback? The dude at the plate.
The hitter.
He'll tell me if it was a good slider.
Yeah.
Yeah, if he hits it 400 feet, wasn't a good one. If he takes an awful swing at it, he'll tell me, yeah, that was good. I didn't see the spin. I didn't see this. He'll tell me if we've tweaked the changeup grip to go, yeah, that's holding the fastball line a lot better. I don't need a $4,000 piece of equipment to tell me that. Like, I've got, Brad, you had 22 hitters. Every one of them is willing to tell me and is able to tell me, yeah, that changeup's better than it was 3 weeks ago.
Sure.
Think of about 4 or 5 who couldn't see it no matter what.
Fair. Yeah. So 17 that could that are more than willing to give that feedback. And that's something you don't really get in the private setting because you can't do live ABs all that often, or you don't always just have guys to even take live ABs or a catcher available or even dudes to just stand in. But that's something you really get at the team level where you throw this pitch to 3 different dudes and they're all going to come back and tell me, here's what I saw, I didn't see this. And we can kind of make pretty good assumptions based off that. I don't need and I've seen this countless times in the private facility where we've got the spin efficiency perfect on certain pitch and it's doing exactly what we want to. Then it gets lit up in a game. Well, it doesn't matter. Obviously, the hitter's not seeing it the way we're seeing it, right? At the end of the day, that's what matters, is being able to get the dude with the bat in his hands out.
Right.
And they're the ones who are going to tell me best how that's working.
And I think pitch logic is going to be a great tool because while we use the hitter feedback and we're using the context of the game to drive pitch design in a lot of ways, it's going to give us an ability to put it in a kid's hand, take a 2-second break, let the ball stay still, and then get the spin angle, get the axis, get the efficiency of it, just to make sure to kind of double check both things.
Yeah.
Not necessarily drive the design. The output's got to drive the design. We have to have an ROI on it.
Right. And I think it's a much easier way for me to almost do it subtly.
That makes sense.
Like, I can do it and I don't even have to show them. I don't even have to have the big iPad or whatever. It's just on my phone. I can peek. Yeah. Okay. Whatever. He doesn't even need to know about it.
It's what's going on there.
So I think so many guys get kind of focused in on what's the spin efficiency, right? What was the spin rate? And it's Don't worry about it. He
Oh,
swung
no,
and
it was a
missed. That's
double.
all you need to worry about.
Yeah.
It's
so,
fun enough that the dude with the bat didn't hit it. That's all that matters.
Brad, I think you touched on a key point where we all of a sudden, on one hand, you've got the kids more. There is more time, but there's simply more volume of them that's eating up that time also. So your approach individually is different. Your application of your time is different. I think the representation of volume is different in a cage and a facility than it is on a team.
It is.
So,
it's not my responsibility in a facility setting to get them to hit better. That's not my role. My role is to put them in a position that they can go help themselves hit better, that they understand and can process through it better. On the team and the field side, it's my responsibility on the other side of that. It's my responsibility to get them to hit better. And the two, while they need to be married together, they're two very different mentalities and two very different processes.
Yeah, and like if you send me a DM of a kid on flat ground or something that I should take a look at, that kid doesn't just represent another hitter that you're going to work with. To me, he represents, well, that's another 30 credits this year that I've got to get a kid. That's another financial aid process I got to go through. That's another kid that's going to take 150 or 200 BP swings a week. That's another guy that I've got to help place into a 4-year school. That's that the difference between the 21st player and the 22nd player isn't just what you're going to do with them. He adds a whole lot of additional responsibility into the team. And I don't want to say that he has to be worth it, but he's got to fit the plan of what we do so that it doesn't add undue burden onto everybody else.
Right.
And then even so, you might have 22 hitters. Some guys are going to get prioritized over others. I think that's just natural. You can care about them all the same, but how much time you spend with individual guys needs to be directly reflected of who's going to help us the most to win games.
Yeah.
I think the pitching side is that way too. Like you don't really have time for a pet project, Josh. Like
at least not once January hits.
No, it's kind of like, hey, these guys are going to help us. Let's make them help us as much as we can, while still having an eye on development and attention paid to the guys lower down the depth chart. But they're not priorities by any means, it seems.
No, we've got 3 dudes who've got to start games this weekend. Let's figure out how we get them feeling the best, throwing the best, as opposed to how can I help this guy get better? Like we've got to win games at this point.
Right. And I think that gets I think that's a cognitive difference that kids coming out of a facility don't realize they're getting into in college. That they don't simply just represent somebody else walking through the door who's going to get equal opportunity from the instructors to get better. They represent an entire collection of variables that we need to account for that have to add to what we do to win games. And that might mean they get less time than somebody else on the field. It might mean they get less time instructionally than somebody else does, because the representation of volume isn't equally distributed through our workflow. But I don't know how in a facility you would ever kind of bridge that gap for kids. I don't know.
I don't know that you could. Yeah, I don't think you can.
I just don't know that it's talked about a lot.
And especially because considering on where they go, they can end so differently on the pecking order.
Yeah.
We can have guys that walk into us and be top 5 or 7, whether it's hitter or pitcher on the pecking order. They go walk on at a Power 5 school, they're number 22.
Right.
They're the walk on. There's no investment in them.
Right. No, I think that, and then I don't know that we're doing an awesome job in the recruiting process or the development process of explaining that to kids, kind of how those things go. We want you to work really hard. That's kind of a given. It just so happens that everybody else is working really hard too.
Yeah.
And sometimes the dude is going to get 150 ABs. We're not going to kick him out of the cage on 6 like we kick you out on the cage on 6. Like it's just how things are kind of handled differently. And I don't quite know how to approach that with kids, other than just to kind of make sure our culture and our environment kind of lays out those ground rules pretty easily.
Yeah. I mean, I even heard Vanderbilt's pitching coach last night in a Zoom chat was like, if our staff's great, we've got 8 pitchers. If it's good, we have 10. Like, and if we're okay, it's 12. But like, if they're good and it's a great staff, only 8 dudes are really throwing innings.
It's the truth.
And
And
you got to be one of those 8.
I think that's when you come through travel ball and you're the dude, and you come through high school ball and you're the dude, it's really hard when you step onto the college campus and understand that it's not equal opportunity. It's equal belonging. Like we're treating everybody the same as team rules apply, but maybe the application's different. But like the opportunities that you're going to get on the field may not be equitable in any way, shape, or form.
No, I 100% agree. One of the things that I know I need to be better at going forward is allocating the time a little bit better when necessary, but then making sure that for somebody who isn't going to get the same amount of reps, to get that development that's a little bit closer to live in-game type bullets, that you're still setting them up with a plan that they understand and they can go get the work done on their own. It's not like they're just left on their own to fend for themselves and it's you bide your time and eventually maybe. No, it's still giving them reason to believe that there are steps being taken forward and helping them understand it may not be from me. There may not be a whole lot of in-person communication, especially out on a field or in game, but they have the confidence to go own it and still take those steps.
Sure. No, that makes sense. And I think I can do a better job of explaining that you're as much a part of the team if I leave you out of the BP lineup on game day as you are if you're the guy in the first group. The same expectations are there for you. The same goal structure is there for you. The same accountability from my end should be expected from you towards your development process. But the application's not going to be even across the team.
Correct.
I think I need to articulate that to guys a lot more early on so they kind of understand. At the end of the day, we have to contribute towards victories. And that doesn't necessarily just mean the ones on the NJCA website with the W's and L's, but it's victories, and you have to contribute to victories in the classroom, victories in the development, victories in our cultural awareness and our community involvement. I'm trying to stack W's as much as I can. You got to be bringing something to the table that's helping me get them, helping us get them, really. And I think we need to talk about that more and in kind of plain terms, I believe, to a degree. So, you guys have anything else you want to add?
I'm good.
We're good. Well, this was a good office talk. Deal. So let's pause.